have entered another community. So we left Midtown Edmondson when we crossed the bridge, and we've come into Evergreen Lawn and, wait a minute, just north of me. Wait, which one? Pinehurst. I was going to see Penrose. It's Pinehurst, thank you. And Pinehurst. So this is kind of the dividing line for those two communities, Evergreen being south and Pinehurst being to the north, which is right, Mr. Taylor's neighborhood. Thank you. I'm working on a little bit of sleep, so bear with me. But what you'll notice is that the planning for this area was very different in terms of the setbacks.
Sort of a tri-community area, right? Bridgeview Green Lawn is also sort of
yes. Yes, Bridgeview Green Lawn as well. And so there's the setbacks on the properties, the porches on the properties. So this was a slightly more affluent community, and I guess kind of the bridge between folks living in the working class neighborhoods and those living out in the county, where you will see, I mean, what used to be the county. Because when you go into areas like Forest Park, Gwen Oak, Windsor, I mean, these communities have just mansions, and they're now in the city proper, but at one time that was the community. So those were the upper echelon in the area. One of the very interesting things about this area, and I could not find this on this particular website. Let me just see. Let me just make sure it wasn't in here. In terms of statistics.
Sort of why Kieran's looking. These are also, and you may not be able to tell it now because there's no one out on the streets, but these are also more diverse neighborhoods.
Yes.
And ethnically diverse neighborhoods. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to find that in the middle of the city.
Yes.
But you go to the community association meetings over here, and you see a diverse body of folks. And they're, I was surprised to see it, and very pleased that there are pockets on the west side of Baltimore still demonstrating that you can build a great community, a great diverse community in the city and in urban hubs without the notion of gentrification being something that destroys and devastates an area.
Right. And changes really the fabric of the community too, because there's a lot of history here, a lot of preservation. I mean, this area is, I think, on the watch list for historic preservation. There's some people pushing against that, but there is a lot of history in these properties, and so there's some merit to that. If you still have your statistic sheet with you, on page 6 is the income, median household income in this area. And if you look, it's on the lower end of the spectrum for the city. And a lot of that speaks to the age of the population as well. Because again, fixed income seniors are trying to hold it down, basically, in this area. And so a lot of them own their homes outright. Either they paid the mortgages off themselves, or they inherited the properties from their parents. And so, so they're able to, so they're able to maintain based on their fixed incomes. But this is not, a 50K, 75K plus median income household neighborhood. So even with lower income families and folks, you can still have very strong quality of life, sense of community. And sometimes I think people, it's either or. It's really not. It's finding that balance. And then on the next page, on page 7, is political engagement. And I thought that this was very interesting. They looked at, there was one statistic for registered voters, and this area has a very high percentage of registered voters as compared to other parts of the city, and not only registered, but voting registered voters. And that's what's depicted on sheet 7. So this is a very politically and just engaged area of the city, not just this community, but the greater area around here. So sometimes people would say, oh well, they're not, people are disengaged, they're not coming to meetings. No, this is an engaged community. The investment and the recognition is not really there. That's kind of what's missing. And then the last page, which is page 8, is unemployment. And I think that this also speaks to some of the challenges that we have in building more sustainable communities. If people don't have jobs, obviously they can't pay mortgages, they can't renovate homes. And so on top of this being one of the most populated areas, one of the most engaged in terms of political voting, in terms of housing stock. The properties here are very solid. Unemployment is very high in these areas, and so those are some of the challenges that we have when we talk about getting people from the communities to really take ownership, literally, of the community. They can't do that without a job. And so those are some of the things we're hoping that projects like the Red Line, revitalization of the area over there where the bowling alley used to be, to bring jobs back to this area, because that's what kept the fabric of the community together. So we're...
No, I was going to say, I remember we talked about, or at least what I felt was the true challenge when we talk about gentrification over here, because that's part of what their a major theme is that you have a high senior population that isn't going to end up with some of these jobs even when they come.
Right.
And so that's where the real threat is. How do you find some surety, find some safeness, find a way to keep them from being displaced as areas go up. Although, again, as you can see, very little vacancy, green lawns. So there's a great deal of this is a stable neighborhood.
Yes.
Very, very stable.
There's a lot of pride in the community here. And one of the things I know I've talked a little bit about, the influx of black migrants into the city between World War I and World War II. You had a lot of public housing being built in the 40s to accommodate the lower income blacks that were coming in. And then around the 50s, there was, and let me just grab my note. That's a big note. The 50s, we had something in the area, a new highway project come through. And that was supposed to be I-170, and it was to connect to I-70, which terminates at Cook's Lane now, if you've ever driven that. And that was a huge catalyst for this area. We're going to see the end product of it as we walk. That's going to be our next stop. But ultimately, this was a highway project that was supposed to link the county to downtown, an expressway, and they ended up taking some 900 plus homes, businesses, churches, wiping them out, digging this ditch, and that the community really has never recovered from that. And that was in the 50s. And then in the 60s, we had the assassination of Martin Luther King and the riots. And East and West Baltimore felt the brunt of the impact for that in terms of the damage to property, the exodus of people from the city into the county. And so what we're seeing now is kind of the aftermath of all of that. So from the 40s to the 60s, the late 60s, that was a big, it was turmoil, if you will, in this part of the city and many other parts of the country as well. So we're going to head down. We're walking through, again, we're at the border of what's Pinehurst to the north, Evergreen Lawn to the south. We're going to walk through Evergreen Lawn, and we're going to end up at the MARC station, and that's kind of our last stop on this tour. And we'll talk a little bit about that area as well.